Have you ever thought about developing a podcast as a part of your scholarship? Do you worry about what others might say if you're not doing so-called real research? Hey, co-authors. In this episode, I talk about my journey from my doctoral program into podcasting. I look into some of the problems that might face you if you're thinking about starting a podcast or other types of social media scholarship. I also offer some starting tips for podcasting to get you started. So let's dive in. So whenever I started my doctoral program, I chose the university that I wanted to do my doctoral program because I had wanted to study with a particular scholar. His name was John Warren, and he was doing work that was very cutting edge, very cool in my field, and I was very fortunate that I'd been accepted and that I'd gotten a research fellowship. I had gone straight through my bachelor's and my master's programs, and I really didn't have a very strong idea, I don't think, of what it meant to be a doc student. I think what I expected was a culture where you worked very closely under a specific professor, and that person showed you all the ropes and helped you get published and really kind of took you on as an apprentice into the field. Because that's kind of what I had at least thought that I had seen as I was reading all the scholarship going through, especially my master's program, was, oh, look at all these very prolific scholars and all of their doc students who were always publishing with them. So I just sort of assumed that that was the culture everywhere. So I get to my university, and unfortunately, John passes away in my first year. So very sudden, he was very young, died of a cancer. It was very bad. And he wasn't just a good scholar, he was just a very good person in the world. And so it was devastating to a whole lot of people. But what that meant for me, though, was I was on a research fellowship with no researcher to tell me what I was supposed to do. And so for the next 4 years in my program, I tried to eke my way through a program where no one was really studying the thing that I wanted to study, because the thing that I wanted to study was communication as it relates to critical theory and qualitative methods and educational contexts. And no one really did that there. And so now, instead of getting mentored by a person who's very well known in that part of the field for the type of work that he's doing, now I've got no one. And what I come to find is that not only is no one really interested in the type of work that I'm doing, but in fact, some people don't even like the type of work that I'm doing in the department, which I didn't really know at the time. I was just like, oh, well, everyone's in the department, so everyone must like each other's work. No, my sweet summer child. Some people think that their research is true and real research and that everyone else's research is not really research. And so I get advice on things like having a paper that I think is really strong, I think is publishable. I get told by a professor, oh, you shouldn't submit that. You're too young in the field. No one knows who you are. You don't really have the reputation to be able to publish work like that. And so whenever I submitted it and I got an R&R, I said, oh yeah, by the way, that paper that I told you about, I submitted it somewhere. I got an R&R, and so I've been working on that. I think it's actually going to get published. No joke, this person did not talk to me for the next 3 weeks. That paper got published right at the end of my program, and I think was probably pretty helpful for me getting the job that I have now, because my job is in communication and education. And so having that publication, which was in a very good journal, ended up probably making my career. But if I had listened to this person, I'd never even submitted it anywhere because I was, quote unquote, too young in the field to submit my work to good journals. So yeah, I was not getting mentorship in a lot of different ways. And so I think people who go through those types of situations, usually they develop in one of two ways. One is they become like that too, right? The sort of old motif of hurt people hurt people. So you get bullied. So the only way that you feel like you can repair yourself is to bully other people. Luckily, I turned out the other way. I credit my parents for doing a pretty good job raising me, I guess, for turning to that choice in my life, which is to say that I kind of made it my mission to do that type of mentorship and to give that type of instruction to other people. So I really love teaching research methods. I really love seeing students submit their work to conferences. I love seeing students publish things. I love to see them be successful because those are things that I was actively discouraged from doing. And so it always brings me a lot of joy to help see other people find and articulate their voices and get that voices heard by an audience. And so that's why I do this podcast, right? Is because I really hope that your program is not like mine was, that you're having a good time, you're being supported by your faculty, you're being mentored in ways that are affirming and sustaining for you. But even if it's a good program, a little bit of extra help never did anyone any harm. So I hope that you're doing well and that this is just a little bit of extra help. But if you are, like I was, in a program that is perhaps not quite the thing that you thought you were signing up for whenever you got into it at first, then I really hope that this podcast helps you out. And so what I want to talk about today then is how to think about podcasting or other types of social media engagement if this is not your bag, how to think about those types of engagement, but particularly podcasting, because that's what I'm doing, as a form of scholarship, and then to give you some tips on how you might get started with doing that if you're interested in it as well. And so that way, if you find this podcast helpful, maybe you too can create a podcast and help other people, kind of pay it forward and help other people out in the world, because I think that's just a better way of being in the world than the alternative. Okay, so let's dive in. Are you interested in mastering scholarly writing, developing productivity, and increasing impact, all while staying healthy? Then welcome to the Publishing Academic Research Podcast. My name is Dr. Kyle Ruddick, and I'm a full professor and writing coach who's dedicated to making sure you break through whatever is stopping you from reaching your scholarly goals. I meet so many scholars who have creative, innovative, and daring ideas, but can never seem to get those projects from proposals to print. I want you to get your work in the hands of people who will read it and appreciate it. So let's get into this week's big idea. A lot of folks, whenever I say that I do podcasting like this, they usually ask me how I'm able to fit it in with all my other research. And I will say that whenever I made the shift to podcasting, I am now not writing as much as I did 5-6 years ago. I was publishing like a machine whenever I was earlier in my career, especially whenever I was pre-tenure. I really wanted to make my mark on the world, and it was really important to me to do that type of work. I do less of that now for a variety of reasons, some of them ethical. I'm increasingly sort of disillusioned by offering up content to publishing companies who don't pay us and who in turn not only sell that work back to our own universities and our own libraries, but then sell that data for AI companies. So I have a problem with that. I have financial considerations. I think 50 years ago, professors were paid enough to where research being a part of our job was being compensated at a rate that even if you were giving that up for free to a publishing company, your actual paycheck was enough that you were like, it all comes out in the wash. I don't think that's the case anymore. And so someone has to pay for this. Our universities aren't paying for us. Publishing companies aren't paying for our content. So where does that leave us? Well, I think it leaves us increasingly financially squeezed. And so there are parts of me that are sort of less enchanted with that traditional model. That's not to say, obviously, that I think publication is worthless. I think the work that I did, I'm very proud of. I think that we should all be engaging in scholarship. I'm also just, broadly speaking, more and more wary of what I see as systems that in some ways are putting professors in a more and more precarious position. And the answer to that being, we'll just publish more, just produce more, just teach more, just do more all the time, right? And I'm very lucky that I'm a tenured professor. And so I get to have a choice to say, I'm not going to do that. But I also think that as a whole, like professors would be in our best interest to probably reevaluate some of the metrics by which we think of success within academia. I guess I'm at my point in my life where, so there's an actor, his name's Clancy Brown. I grew up with him as a millennial. I grew up with this guy as playing the bad guy called the Kurgan in the absolutely terrible but wonderful movie called Highlander. It's an amazingly bad movie. All of the music was done by Queen. If you haven't watched it, watch it. You are probably more likely to know him as the voice of Mr. Krabby from SpongeBob SquarePants. It's where most people know him. But if you're a huge nerd like me, you live and die by the Kurgan. So Highlander 1 is an amazing movie. It's schlocky, campy, but it's amazing. Highlander 2 is terrible, is an objectively bad movie. It's so bad. It's hard to describe how bad it is. Whenever they showed him the script for it, he was like, this is terrible, and I don't want to be a part of this. What's the compensation look like? Because in Highlander 1, he was just this unknown actor, so they didn't pay him anything. But he was like, Highlander 1 was kind of a hit, so like, you're going to pay me more for Highlander 2, right? And they're like, nah, we're still not going to pay you anything. And he was like, okay, I'm out then. I'm not going to do it. And he said, and I think these are what I like to call the wise words of the Kurgan. I will do something that I love for free. I will do something that I do not enjoy for money. And there's no in between. I think that's good advice to live by as you approach how you want to be productive in your life. Is it something that you really don't find a lot of enjoyment in, then you should be getting compensated for that. If you like doing scholarship because you just like to do it, hey, the fact that you're not really getting paid for it as much, maybe that's not as big of a deal to you. Certainly it wasn't for me. I just loved that part of fulfilling my curiosity for the longest time. But now, as I'm reaching another stage of my life, I'm finding that curiosity doesn't drive me in quite the same way, and that those types of outlets are less attractive to me. And I am more interested now in taking my knowledge and giving that to you all for free in a podcast. So I don't monetize this. I don't have commercials with it. I don't hawk products and get a cut off any of them. None of that stuff. I just like the idea of helping people who might need some advice on this sort of stuff. But at this point, to me, if I have spare moments, it's about things that I'm very passionate about, like this podcast or playing pickleball and running the UNI pickleball team, which is a lot of fun, and just doing stuff that, I don't get paid for, but hey, it's a lot of fun, or things that I think are financially attractive, but there's not really an in-between there for me. So all that is to say, as you're thinking about podcasting as a type of scholarship, what you might run into are folks at your institution who don't think that this is a form of scholarship. And it's really important that if you are going to use it in that way, that you are putting it appropriately in your tenure and or promotion files, that you check with your chair and your dean and your committees and make sure that it's in the right spot. It's actually helping you in your career. I'm very lucky that we have a union on campus, so we have a handbook that is very robust in what counts as scholarship. And we use the Boyer model and other affiliated work in that area that talks about different forms of scholarship. So most folks, whenever they think of research, they think of what Boyer calls the scholarship of discovery. That is original research that is used to answer a question, right? So that might be your traditional research article published in a journal, has some sort of peer review to it, but is widely and universally recognized as scholarship. But there are, according to this model and other models that are out there, that's not the only type of scholarship that professors can produce. So Boyer talks about a form of scholarship called the scholarship of application. And examples of that might be support of community activities in a field or industry in a way that links with your academic discipline. And so I'm lucky enough, right? I'm in communication and media. And so doing a podcast is a community activity, part of my field and my industry. I'm applying the knowledge of my research by making a podcast. Another way that I could think about it is as a performance or a presentation in a venue with a review. If I wanted to do that, there's two ways that I could probably make that argument. First would be whenever you all give me ratings, that is one way that review is happening. So if you haven't already, just quick shout out. If you could give me a 5-star review and write something nice about the podcast, I'd certainly appreciate that. But I could also make a request formally to my department head to have scholars from another institution who do the type of work that I do to review my podcast and to write a formal review of my podcast that would be put into my tenure and promotion file. That would also be a way for me to count this as scholarship. So if you're interested in doing a podcast, there are ways that you can get your university to formally recognize this as a type of scholarship. Now, I will say it is not going to count as much as traditional scholarship of discovery. Most places are going to want you to still publish in those peer-reviewed journals. And I think that's been the strong selling point whenever I started this with my dean has been, look, I'm talking about the things that I teach about. I teach research methods. I write about research methods. I use research methods. I'm very well published in these areas. Now I get a chance to take that knowledge and apply it as a scholarship of application to a different and arguably a wider audience than I would have otherwise. And so it counts as a part of my scholarship. Now, if I had been pre-tenure and I did not have a robust traditional scholarship profile, would this be the thing that got me tenure? Probably not. I mean, my university is pretty teaching centric, and so maybe it would have been enough, but it would have been by the merits of other aspects of my job, my teaching and my service, rather than my scholarship being the strong point of my TMP file. But it is a way for you to expand your audience. For example, right now, if you look at my highest read article, I think it's maybe 4,000 or 5,000 downloads, right? If you looked across all of my scholarship, maybe 50,000 people, 60,000 people have downloaded my work. That's over, 10 years of writing. Some things have 100 people who have read it. Other things have a few thousand, right? Right now, this is my 50th episode. Woohoo! Yay! And I just hit, coincidentally at the same time, my 10,000th download. So that's really cool. Thank you all for listening. So yeah, if I extrapolate that out to 10 years, even if I just keep that going at the same numbers, that's 100,000 people who have listened to my podcast. So nearly twice as many people will have engaged with my work as opposed to my written scholarship. I would like to hope that my podcast continues to grow, and so might even be more than 100,000. All that is to say that there are ways for you to make an argument that the reach and impact of the type of work that you're doing in your podcasting, other types of social media can really start to have an impact. And especially as we see the erosion of trust between the public and higher education, this might be one way in which all of us can help with that a little bit, which is to say by having well done, hopefully, don't blame me too hard if there are things about my podcast that you don't like, but if we all do pretty well done, hopefully well done podcasts, and people tune into those and they find value in those things, then they find value in our work and they find value in higher education, and that's to all of our benefit. So let's say that you're thinking about doing a podcast. So what might be some tips that you would have that you might need to get started? The first thing that I'll say is before I get into the tips, I was very lucky. I have a colleague, her name is Danielle McGue, and she has her own podcast. If you have not started to listen to it, I would encourage you to go give it a listen. It's called Plan, Goal, Plan. It's one of the top 1% rated podcasts in the world. She's very, very good at what she does. And she was kind enough to take me under her wing and give me some advice whenever I wanted to start this journey. And so I avoided a lot of mistakes and pitfalls that I think a lot of early podcasters fall into because she started doing her podcasting stuff years and years ago. So she found all those landmines for me. So if you ever meet her, you'll know she's just an honest to God good person, and it was very kind of her to help me out. So listen to her podcast. She also does consulting on making podcasts. So if you're really, really interested, then you can even reach out to her and connect with her and see if she can help you create your podcast. She and I, this last year, we did a presentation at a conference about creating a podcast. And so I'll talk about 3 tips that I learned whenever I started this. So the first one is you need to make a decision on, are you going to be a audio only, video only, or both audio and video podcast? So if you're like me and you feel very weird about putting your face out into the world because you grew up as a millennial being told by every adult in your life, never let people see your real identity on the internet, then you do an audio only podcast. A lot of podcasters, if you go to the podcasting subreddit, there's a lot of help there, but a lot of podcasters will live and die by the idea that the term podcasting should only be reserved for audio only podcasts. They would call video podcasting more like vlogging or some other type of social media. I'm not going to get into which term is the right term or the wrong term. I'll just call it all podcasting. But I will just say that there are different commitments to either one of those. The good thing about an audio-only podcast is that the only technical expertise that I need to have is just on the audio side of things. Whereas if you do video, you need to have both sides of expertise in terms of editing, cutting, all those different things, and you need to have the equipment for both of those things. So the first thing is just thinking about what type of venue you're going to go for. The next tip that I would say is that you need to be very candid about how much time it's going to take in order for you to create a podcast. So for me, I would say whenever I very first started, it would take me probably about an hour and a half to do the research, write up my notes, get my outline, get everything ready in order for me to have an episode. Then it's about an hour to an hour and a half to record what ends up being a 20 to 30 minute podcast. The editing then of that podcast took me about 3 to 4 hours, and then publishing the podcast, promoting the podcast, all that sort of stuff, 30 minutes to an hour. Okay. So that is every week. Every week's podcast takes that much time. So if you think about that, that's what, 3, 4, 5 hours a week, every week that you're having to put together. And that's if everything's going well, right? That doesn't count the times that you upload things and it doesn't upload correctly and then your files get corrupted, or something goes wrong and you have to redo an entire episode, or whatever happens, right? There's just a lot of time commitment, and that's just on the brute production of an episode. If you really want a successful podcast, then you're going to have to do a lot of work on promoting it and making connections with other folks, guesting on other people's podcasts, having them guest on your podcast, doing a lot more social media presence. I have to say, I'm very bad about social media. I'm primarily on LinkedIn as a way of promoting the podcast, but honestly, if I had $1 million tomorrow, I would hire someone just to do the social media side of it, because I just, oddly enough, for a person who grew up as an 18-year-old at the same time that Facebook gets founded and gets put out into the world, and you're growing up alongside of social media. Now as a 40-year-old, I can't stand to be on hardly any of it. I just hate having to promote things. I hate having to assuage the algorithm gods. I hate having to do all that stuff. I really wish that I didn't have to. But it is important if you want your podcast to be successful, because if you're not tooting your own horn, well, no one's doing it for you. And so if no one listens to your podcast, what are you doing? So time commitment, I'd say, is the second big thing to really think about. The third thing I would say is that whenever you start off your podcast, it's really important that you are actually overproducing what will end up being your routine in terms of your content output. So what I mean by that is, at this point, I do this podcast weekly, but whenever I started, I was publishing more like 6 or 7 episodes a month. Producing that much content means that people are engaging with your content more, which in turn makes the algorithm gods happy and pushes your podcast up. A lot of people, I think, start off a podcast. They've got a hot idea. They're very interested in it. They get their first episode done. Oh, that's great. Second episode, cool. Then the third episode's maybe a day or two late. Fourth episode's a week late. Next thing you know, it's a once a month or once every 3 weeks or something like that they're putting out an episode. The algorithm really hates that. The way that a lot of these platforms are working, if you're not producing at least once a week, then the platform by which most people are engaging with your work doesn't automatically download it to a person for them to listen to. So they have to engage with your work at least once a week in order for that to happen. So if you're not producing that much, then you're probably missing out on engagement. And that's so important in the first few weeks or months, or even the first year of doing your podcast. So whenever you start off, you need to not only have your first episode, you need to have the first 6 episodes done. And those first 6 episodes are only going to last you 4 weeks. And you think to yourself, oh, a month? That's great. I'll have all this time to make more episodes as those 4 weeks go by. And that might be true if you start during the summer, but if you start during the semester in a fall or a spring, or once you hit fall or spring, you will find that you end up just getting a little bit more behind every time, right? I got the next 4 weeks. I think a little while later, you're like, oh, well, I produced 1 episode, but now I'm only 3 weeks ahead. But it's okay. I'm still 3 weeks ahead. A couple months go by. Okay, well, I'm only 2 episodes ahead now. By the end of the year, if not by the end of the semester, you're like, okay, yeah, now I'm just like 1 day ahead of my drop date every week, because you just got so much other stuff to do. And so it's really important then that you are planning ahead and being regular with your updates, because the algorithm likes that. It does not forgive you being sick, you going on break, you going on vacation, your kid getting sick, your dog getting sick, anything. As soon as you start to miss that at least weekly new content, the algorithm starts to turn against you. Now, you might think to yourself, well, but I listen to like this other podcaster and they're hugely successful and they don't do that. Right, because they're probably on episode 300. They have an established audience. The algorithm treats those people differently. For you, for just starting out, the most important thing for you to do is for you to have regular new content being dropped at least weekly. So those would be the 3 biggest things that I would say. Of course, there's so much more out there. And again, I would encourage you that if you haven't already, go over to Plan Goal Plan, go give it a listen, reach out to Danielle. I don't know if she's taking new clients right now for that sort of thing. Honestly, I didn't even ask her if I could name drop her in this episode. You know, she's good people. I'm not trying to hawk anything. I'm not trying to sell you on this. All I know is that she does this, and it's been very successful for me. I find her to be not just a very good colleague, but a very good person in the world. I'm sure she'd be a lot of help. And her podcast really is amazing. You should give it a listen. I think that's going to wrap it up for me. I want to thank you all again for 10,000 downloads and 50 episodes. It's been pretty cool. Looking forward to continuing to do this work. And if you have things that you want me to talk about, problems that you want me to address, or ideas for episodes, please let me know. Reach out to me. I am on LinkedIn. You can also go to my university website and look me up there. My summer goal for this year is to create an actual website for this podcast other than just the default Podbean one that you get whenever you have your subscription with them. Or you can email me at the email for this project. So it's just publishingacademicresearch@gmail.com. Thank you again for listening, and I will see you in next week's episode. Hey, co-authors. What's stopping your best ideas from becoming your next big publication? Brilliant research shouldn't die in your drafts folder. Now's the time to bridge the gap between the possible and the published. You can support this podcast by subscribing to it, leaving a positive review, assigning it to your classes, or sharing it with a colleague. Let me know what I can do to make this the best podcast resource for you. And if you'd like to know more about my writing coach services, then you can find my information in the podcast description and set up an appointment. I'll be back next week with another episode. But until then, keep healthy, keep writing, and don't let reviewer 2 get you down.